Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm excited to interview my next guest, Bob Dusin, for a number of reasons. And I when I look at his background and look what he's done over the last number of years, I think he might be a brother from another mother because we have a lot of things in common. So first and foremost, Bob, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with me.
Thank you, Peter, for having me today. I was looking forward to it.
Now you can tell by his voice, the man has a voice for radio, and he's the yin, I'm the yang, because I definitely have a face for radio. So this is going to work out real well between us.
Maybe I should have said, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Margaritis.
Even better. Thank you very
So,
much.
yeah, I won't even charge you for that.
I got a giveaway. That's good. Let's see if I can get a few more
Thanks.
out of you today. 'Cause
No,
I'm
really, thanks for having me. I really have been excited about being on your show.
I appreciate that. Now Bob lives in Kansas City, Missouri, and well, he's got a really interesting story of how he went from, let's say, I think Western Kansas, growing up as a
Yeah, farm kid.
farm kid, to he left that part of the country and went to the tiny city called Chicago. I'd love to hear that story about how you made yourself, how you made it to Chicago.
Yeah, well, the farm thing was uh, my parents were always very encouraging of me to do something other than farming because I think they saw that if you want to make a living, you might want to do something other than farming. It wasn't at least then a very lucrative business. And we had a mid-sized farm. We raised wheat and cattle. And so after college, I got a civil engineering degree, went to work here in Kansas City for a construction company. And really all my 40-year career has been here in Kansas City, except for about 4 or 5 years. Um, in about 12 or 13 years into my career, I got offered to be a project manager on a job we got in downtown Chicago. So the farm kid is now going to be in downtown Chicago, and I was nervous and excited, and all things at once. But I love Chicago. I spent, like I said, about 4 years there. Spent a little bit of time in Milwaukee, and then eventually found my way back to Kansas City, working for a different company. So yeah, it was a unique transition, and it was I go from the farm to a college town of about 20 or 30,000 people to Kansas City, about maybe 1.5 million total metro, and then you go to Chicago where it's 30 minutes anywhere. Anywhere it's 30 to 40 minutes, no matter, I don't care if you're going to get groceries, it's 30 to 40 minutes wherever you're going. And so there's a good transition in there, but it was fun. Loved the town and just loved being there. It was I like a good Midwestern city, people with great work ethic, and it was just a great time.
And you spent some time at a place that I really like to go to when I'm in Chicago. You spent some time at Second City. Oh, excuse me,
Yeah,
the Second City.
the Second City, and I want to be clear, I was never a member of Second City, but I took when I moved up there, I'd always been interested in comedy and stand up, and I did a little bit of stand up, but I thought, wow, I'm in Chicago. What better place to look into learning the art of improvisation and studying it? So Second City offered a thing called the Second City Players Workshop. It was about 2 years worth of courses taught by Second City players. And so I took improv courses for 2 years and got the improv bug and have never quit. It's been 30 years now since I started doing it. And once you get into it, it's kind of like golfing or skiing is for a lot of people. Once you get hooked on it, you never want to quit doing it. So I'm actually not that way with golfing or skiing. I just know people who are. So
Yes, and once you catch that bug, it becomes really contagious, and you thrive on it even more. And I know that you currently now, when you're out and you're working with companies, wherever you're using some of the principles of improv and improv techniques in helping your audience understand about leadership and about teams and stuff in that way from what you've learned and gleaned from those years. Even though it'd be 2 years, that's probably I would love to. I've attended a number of workshops, but they've been here or there, kind of like Morgan Freeman's beard, kind of spotches here, spotches here,
Yeah,
spotches here,
right.
versus having that 2 year thread. But it is a lot of fun, and it is a lot of fun to make when audience realize that you're not trying to make them funny, but it's actually a leadership tool.
Yeah, it is. And the thing about improvisation is some of the more people think when they go to see an improv show, a lot of people are and should be expecting some comedy. But really, I've been a part of a lot of improv scenes, and have seen a lot of improv scenes that are very interesting. It's almost like improv theater. It's not really even funny, but the scene is really interesting and has some depth to it, and that can be as interesting as something that's funny. Because one of the worst things you can do in improv is think that everything you say has to be funny. And those kind of scenes tend to go nowhere. So, sometimes there's a big setup for a punchline, but sometimes that punchline never comes, but the setup was still interesting. The story was still interesting.
Right. I think it was Christian Wig who said about improv. Improv is more about listening and trying not to be funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And oftentimes, there was a book, forgive me for not knowing the author right now, I read several years ago. The title of the book is Truth in Comedy. And if you probably have that on your shelf. I have it on a shelf somewhere in my house, but it's just not here. But the great thing about Truth in Comedy is essentially just that. You got it there? There you go. Author?
Yeah, Sharon Harpin and Dale Close and Kim Johnson.
Del Close. I don't know why that Del Close is a Chicago icon. I don't know why I lost his name there for a second. But the funniest things, come out of actual things that happen. And I think even in stand-up, if you're back in the day, maybe you were a Seinfeld fan or Chris Rock or any good stand-ups, they relate stories that we all can relate to, that we all and they see the humor in it, and the funniest things are the things oftentimes that are true. And you find a way to twist that and make it funny. It's the same thing a good storyteller does.
So would you agree with the statement? When we're trying to communicate with an audience in order to keep their attention, humor goes a long way in keeping them awake and increasing their retention.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why when I facilitate a workshop or give a talk, give a keynote, it's the humorous things. It's funny because people say you go to a workshop or a seminar, you're lucky if the average person remembers 10% of what you talked about. But if you talked about something and made it funny, they'll remember that. They remember the funny stuff. They remember the interesting stuff. And so the humor adds to that retention. I go back to the Maya Angelou quote that says, "People will never remember what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel." Right. And people love to laugh. And so, yeah, it's a great retention tool. People remember those things.
They do. And it's amazing. I mean, I know I have a really unique last name. It sounds like a cocktail, but as I was saying, it should be pronounced like an inflammation. I put something together for an accounting talk that was on a very complex accounting standard, but I created this story and made it funny. And I used a mother-in-law as part of as the main character in this story. And people who were at that event in Arizona at that time, if I go back to Arizona, they see me at some other place. They go, "You're the mother-in-law guy."
Yeah.
That means they don't remember my name, which is fine, but they remember what I was talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I gave a keynote recently to a group of healthcare workers, a healthcare organization, and the name of the group is Value Health. I don't think they'll mind me promoting that a little bit. But I gave a talk. They wanted it to be centered around improvisation, but also have a message of what all these healthcare workers have been through in the last year and a half. And so improvisation lends itself really well to that, because the healthcare workers in the past 18 months talk about having to improvise. So, you know, the three elements I talked about, that relate to being a good leader, but also being a good improviser, were being present, which in improv, a lot of times we say be in the moment, be present, take a risk. Don't just stand in the backup line and wait for somebody else to join the scene,
Mhm.
and adapt. You always have to be adaptable. And so it's those elements, like you said, alluded to a little bit ago, those elements of improv that feed directly into leadership and how we interact at work.
Absolutely. And I think, and we were talking about this at one point in time over the last month or so. Um, we all improvise every single day. We
Every
come in,
day, all day.
right, every day, all day. And by the way, if do you have a son or daughter?
I have two sons.
Two sons. Well, I remember my son was born. Put him in the car, and I went, wait a minute, we left the manual behind. There's no manual. What do you mean? I don't. How am I supposed to take care of this baby?
Right.
Well, we went through some classes beforehand, and then baby gets sick. Call your parents. Call the neighbors who's got like 15 kids. What do I do? But you go find out that information. We're improvising all the time. I just want people to recognize it
Yeah.
and then leverage that now versus just not really recognizing what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one of the messages I had was for the healthcare group I just spoke with was, you had to do all these things in the last year: improvise, be present, and take risks. Moving forward as leaders, let's not just do those things in times where we have to. Let's do them because we want to, and it makes for a better work environment. Let's look for ways to adapt, not because our business calls for it right now, it's an emergency, but let's look for ways to adapt. Be more present, which you said earlier, listening. You know, we have to make sure we're taking the time to listen and not just focus on other things, and then take those risks. I compare it to, like I said, standing in a backup line in an improv scene. You have two people out performing a scene and two or three people in the backup line watching, listening, looking for maybe an opportunity to join the scene. But if you overthink it and you think, well, is what I'm going to add going to be funny? Is it going to be interesting? Or maybe these two people were just about ready to do something really cool or interesting or funny, so I better let them go. And you think about that for just a few seconds, and the scene may be over, or somebody else has jumped in.
Right.
So you have to take those risks and not be, and when I say risks, I don't mean life or death risks, but the risks that we don't take because we're worried about, what if we fail? What will other people think? Are people going to think I'm worthy of doing this? And I've battled that all my life, but improv has helped me get through and change my mindset on a lot of that.
Yeah, that is so true. We get stuck in our heads a lot of times, and I remember when I first was introduced to it, I would be that person in the back of the line. Is this the right thing? Should I make this move? And I remember being in Chicago at one of the workshops, and the exercise was the world's worst. So we had a backup line. It was lined up against the wall,
Right.
and the topic, the world's worst police officer, and you had to jump out. And
Yeah.
if somebody came out, world's worst police officer, I think I'm going to give you a ticket. Now just go ahead and go on, and then jump back. You cannot leave that stage empty. You
Right.
force yourself, whether you say it's funny or not, but you just get it out, and you don't overthink it. And I see so many people today,
Yeah.
the way they, and a little transparency, I find myself also overthinking what I'm doing and just not doing it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the old, what do they call it? Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
We think about it so long, we just end up not taking any action, or not doing it when we should do it.
Right.
I don't know. That made me think too. I don't know how many times after an improv show, even an improv show that we thought was mediocre at best, we weren't maybe clicking really well. People will come up afterwards and say, "Man, I just don't know how you all do that. How do you get? I could never. You ought to. I'll say we ought to try it. Oh, I could never improvise. And I want to tell them just what we said earlier. You improvise every day. What they're really saying is, I don't want to be on stage in front of a bunch of people. That I get.
Yeah.
But don't think you can't improvise, because some people that I've improvised with and performed with are in their normal everyday life aren't they don't go out of their way to try to be funny, or they're even fairly serious people.
Mhm.
But you get them on stage and they can be hilarious. They can be really interesting and really good at it. So yeah, people are always saying, "Oh, I could never improvise." I think you could.
Yeah, I think they could too. I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, speaking in this auditorium. I was like balcony, and I had this huge screen, and I asked for volunteers on a couple exercises, and this one it just went crickets, and this lady said, "Okay, I'll come up there and do this." So she comes up, and we had a blast on stage. Yeah, I don't remember what the game it was. I screwed up somehow, made it. I wasn't trying to, but made it funny. We had a good time, and I said, "So, what was the hardest thing about this exercise?" Volunteering. She goes,
Yeah,
"That's the hardest part."
yeah,
But you put yourself out there, you lean into that fear,
right.
and then everything else, as long as the facilitator is doing their job, everything else is fine. It's
Yeah.
just putting yourself out there.
Well, once you jump in the deep end, you got no choice but to swim. I mean, you're there, you do something, and you find out it works.
So, when you're put in those type of situations, uh, I, where there's really no net out there,
Yeah.
and it's just, I don't know about you, but I get exhilarated. I just get so amped up
Oh,
for it, where everybody else is like shying away. It's like I'm running into the fire.
yeah. Yeah, I remember this has happened a couple times that I remember, because I've done hundreds of shows over the years, but there's been a couple times where somebody had started a scene and I jumped out into the scene and just went completely blank on anything. I didn't go out there with any preconceived idea of what I wanted to say or do. I just jumped out, and me and her just looked at each other, and then I looked at the audience, and then I looked at her, and we were both doing it, and everybody cracked up. Everybody started laughing, simply because I couldn't think of anything to say or do, and that became funny. So yeah, it's taking that risk and just getting after it. Talking about when I moved to Chicago, that was a story I relayed to the group I just recently spoke with, which was a new. I wrote a new keynote just for this group and what they wanted me to talk about.
Mhm.
So moving to Chicago is one of the stories where my boss here in Kansas City called me into his office, and I'll make the story a lot shorter. Said they wanted to ask me if I wanted to move to Chicago to be a project manager on a 70-story high-rise building that was going to last about 3 years. And that's where, again, I started getting in my head, because we start thinking of all the reasons we shouldn't do it, or
Right.
we aren't skillful, or we don't have the ability to do it. We aren't. I was 27 years old and I was going to go manage a 70-story high rise, and I on the way home that night, I just kept thinking about, I'm moving away from a town that I know really well. I've got great friends here. I've got family here. I'm moving to a city where I don't know anyone. I've never been a project manager. I'm too young. I don't know enough. I was thinking of all these reasons for staying in the backup line, for not jumping in. And I went in the next morning and I told my boss, I said, I'm taking the job, because I wanted to commit, because I knew I'd talk myself out of it if I didn't. I
That's
went in, I said, I'm doing it, done. And it was a great experience.
I I can relate to that. I mean, I just thought of a bunch of stories, but as you were talking about that, I want to read something from your website that it's on your full bio. And it said he took his love of comedy and early success in TV and radio, which we have to talk about, coupled with his passion for business, became a project manager, a human resource director, and owned a successful construction company before becoming an industry leading expert, consultant, executive coach, and facilitator. human resource
Whose
director.
website are you reading?
Yeah, that's what I thought the first time. I said, no, it's Bob. I can see his picture there.
Yeah.
So it's you've got a lot more in your background other than being that civil engineering person, and you've evolved into a couple of different roles.
Well, it really worked out great, Peter, because when I was in Chicago, I had been in construction and project managing and project engineering for 12, 13 years. And when that job was done, um, I wanted to move back to Kansas City, but there wasn't a job opening with the company I was with. And I left on good terms. So I moved back and I actually met a guy that had a small concrete construction company. So I partnered with him for a couple of years and we did driveways and patios. It was kind of a fun business. And then my old company that I had moved to Chicago to work with and that I'd worked with here in Kansas City called up and said, we have an opening here. We wanted to consider you if you wanted to come back to work for us. To do training in human resources. And I thought, well, there's a 180-degree shift from what I'm doing. Sure, that'll be fun. So again, before the voices got in my head telling me why I shouldn't or couldn't do it, I said, yeah, I'll do it. And so that started that chapter in a whole different perspective. But you know what, Peter, that's really what got me interested in wanting to do what I'm doing now. I'd have probably never taken off to be a facilitator, leadership development coach, speaker, if I hadn't gone into the human resources and training arena, because that's what started getting me up in front of groups and interacting more with people and people issues more than I was on the project management end of things.
Yeah, and as you're describing the story, I'm thinking you're using in your head you're using those two words that are critical in improvisation. Yes, and when do I start?
Yeah,
Yes, and
absolutely.
how much you gonna pay me? Yes,
Exactly.
and what's my
Exactly
reload
what it
package?
was. Yes, I can do it. And yeah, here's the
Right.
big question. And are you going to give me the blank check? So yeah, but in hindsight, I think all of, I like to think that a lot of the decisions we make are the best decisions. Even though I could have made different decisions and those would have been the best decisions, because it's about, again, improvising and maximizing what you can do with where you're at in your career or in your life. So, things would have been fine if I wouldn't have moved to Chicago. Who knows what else, where the path would have taken me. And I still may be right here doing similar to what I'm doing now. I don't know that. But I always look back and I never want to have regrets about, well, I wish I'd have done more of this or pursued this a little harder. Because you mentioned radio and TV.
Yeah.
That was one thing I've always done as kind of a side job. I've not done TV in the sense of being a broadcaster, but I've done commercials and voiceover work. And then that got me into doing voice work for like everything from training manuals to videos for, workshops or whatever. So I've done that kind of as almost as a side job. And I never really pursued it as hard as I could have done it, but I just had other interests. So the voice and radio work is always fun, a fun thing to do. That's different from what I'm doing now.
Yes, and I know that you do some voices, and you want to give them a little bit of a taste of a couple of the characters that you have floating around in your head that you can do really well.
Oh gosh, there's characters and there's actually like impersonations, and I used to do more impersonations, and so nowadays a lot of the millennials have never heard of a lot of the impersonations I do because I really haven't worked on any new ones. But back in the day, and especially in things like doing some stand-up and stuff, I do Tom Brokaw with the NBC Nightly News. Hello, I'm Tom Brokaw with the NBC Nightly News. More later on Dateline with Katie Couric. I'm Tom Brokaw. And
and of course, you know, then there's Bill Clinton. I'm so happy to be here. I know you do a good Bill Clinton.
Bill talking to Bill right now.
That's
How you
Bill
doing,
talking to
Bill?
Bill, and you know what? I like that. It's really awesome. It's one of the best things I've ever done. But then that one leads into, for the old school, leads into Don Knotts doing when he played Barney Fife. So you take Bill Clinton talking like this, and you know, and then you just go into a little bit whinier voice, you know, no, you know, and then you get Barney Fife, and I suppose I'm going to go check with old Aunt B, you know, Ange, let's see what she's up to. So, say, Ange, did you ever see my bullet laying around? I left it here somewhere. It might be laying over there on the end table. Well, I got to go now. I got to, you know, somebody's got to keep this town safe. So Bill Clinton, very close to Barney Fife.
I never realized that. So when did you first start doing these impressions? Was there one that just kind of you worked on that kind of got you started?
That was probably the one. Barney Fife was probably the one. I worked on others as a kid and got close on some, but another one of my earlier ones I did was Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, because so many people, when they do Arnold Schwarzenegger, they do a caricature of his voice. You know, they do it over the top. You know, but I'm not that type of person that is going to do something like, you know, too extreme. You know, I can say, "Get to the chopper now," you know, but that's the character Arnold. You know, doing a character on perhaps on a movie or a TV show.
My first character that I did as a kid was I did Donald, and then I started morphing into your Earth creatures make me very, very angry. I'm gonna zap you with my humanoid gun, and I just kept kind of building from that. And this
I never could do the Donald thing. I could do that, but I can't talk while I'm doing it. So
it is kind of difficult to do that.
I did like the space alien. That was probably one of them I did as a kid on Bugs Bunny. But
Yeah.
the uranium 238 space modulator.
Marvin the Martian. But the one I've been working on for a while is Morgan Freeman. But I work on Morgan Freeman in a different way. I think Morgan could read you anything.
Yeah.
And you say like you know, Morgan, I just got a notice from the IRS. Could you read this to me? Dear taxpayer, I'm gratefully inform you that your 1993 tax return will now be under audit. And just it's that soothing voice that he has, like, oh sure, come and audit me. I don't care.
His ability to put emotion in what he reads is just incredible. People that can do that is amazing. Yeah.
How much voiceover work are you doing? How much of that piece are you doing today in your business to go along with your keynotes and your workshop and your coaching?
You know, not that much in the last probably 5 years. I haven't done as much just because it does take time and effort to pursue it, to reach out, to market yourself in that arena.
Right.
And doing that takes away from all the other things I really want to do. And frankly, it's not in a lot of markets, unless you're a big fish, it's not really all that lucrative. So you can spend a lot of time getting a voice gig and then not get that much out of it, unless maybe you're a union person. But union jobs pay more because you get residuals, but you're also in a bigger pool of people auditioning for things. And so it's a hard thing to really break into because there's so many people out there who can do it at some level.
Right.
We're continually competing with each other.
Right. Yeah. I've always wanted to do more voiceover work, but to that point, it's like, okay, one, getting started, and two, having that focus, that energy, that time to invest into perfecting that and taking a little bit away from what you've already built and trying to perfect that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, 10, 15 years ago when I was working at it a little more, I'd go in this is before I could do an audition either via Zoom or in my studio here and send it in, you went to the agency, you went to your agent's office and they recorded you there and you did this audition. I'd go in for something that was going to be maybe a 30-second TV spot or radio spot. There's 25, 30 other people reading for it. Well, my chances of coming out, and it just I just was investing a lot of time in reading for parts and bits that so many other people were also trying for. And that's when I kind of think I started thinking there's better ways to invest my time and my efforts.
Do you do this during your keynotes and coaching and workshops? Do you strategically at times use that different voice, use that character voice because they're not expecting it?
Oh, yeah.
It kind of snaps them like, he's doing Schwarzenegger?
Yeah. And it's a great thing to do to catch people off guard with it. I was doing a workshop one time and I went into a voice. I think I started doing Forrest Gump. And I said something like, now look, I'm not a smart man, but I can tell you something, and it's going to be something kind of important. So you might want to listen. And if you listen good, then I think you're going to be smarter for it. And I did that, and people were laughing and chuckling and saying, commenting and stuff. And one person in the back, she said, and I can't remember the name. Oh, is he doing? Oh, she goes, is that Matthew McConaughey? And everybody looked at her like, no, it is not. That was funny. So, but yeah, you break into Arnold Schwarzenegger, again, like Barney Fife is so old that if I did that in a group of millennials, they probably wouldn't know who I was doing. But if it's a group of, as I am, more experienced people, people with more life experience, you break into stuff like that. And again, it's that whole humor, retention, gets the audience, it keeps the audience engaged with you, all that good stuff.
Bob, I got an idea for us. We should put an improv troupe together and do the assisted living tour.
Awesome. Yes. I love it.
They would know Barney Fife. They would know some of the characters that
absolutely.
They would laugh at it and we wouldn't have to worry about it.
We wouldn't have to come up with any new stuff now.
We could do the young Carlin, you could do Bob Hope, you could do Johnny Carson. They would just be all over that stuff.
Another one that they don't know now, because he's gone now, but he's also been off the air for a long time, was Casey Kasem.
Oh, wow.
And I always like to do Casey Kasem. And now on with the countdown. Here's a long distance dedication from Peter Margaritis. Peter Margaritis in Columbus writes, "Dear Casey."
And then you throw in some song title. So yeah, we do have to find an audience for people that recognize all this.
Yeah, and they would get as big a laugh as I just got from you doing Casey Kasem, because man, did that take me back
oh gosh,
a number of years.
Yeah.
You keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
Oh God. So for my audience, I'm finding that even the millennials, they're starting to listen to our music from back in the day, that classic rock, as becoming more and more. So maybe some of these voices that might start resonating with them. But if you're not recognizing any of these impersonations that Bob is doing, go Google them. Go Google the character, the actor, and listen to them and realize how good this guy is with these voices, because they're pretty much spot on.
I always think I should start working on some new ones that I can use in workshops and talks and things that maybe more people would recognize. I've worked a bit on Trump and Biden and but I hate to get into the whole. I hate for people to think it's political, because I don't want to do that. But there are a lot of cool current voices out there that are really distinct, that I think, if you just worked on, the person worked on, they'll get them.
I've tried to do Obama a number of times, and he has this little whistle in his voice. It's a little thing,
Mhm.
and he has that cadence and that
He,
pause.
that kind of staccato
Yeah.
cadence where he pauses at kind of odd times and then punches a certain word when he does it. Yeah, yeah, he's a tough one to do. I've tried that too, and and it's funny because I find myself at certain times listening to people, um, and especially a famous person, and thinking, how could I how would I start to do an impersonation? I get to where I'm not even paying attention to what they're saying. I'm just listening to that voice and the how they talk. You know, I'm like, I don't know what the guy said. I was just I was just trying to figure out how I could impersonate him.
Obama was on WTF podcast with Mark Marion, I believe his name is, and I must have listened to that a dozen, 2 dozen times, trying to get that cadence, trying to get
Yeah.
that. And then there was another thing where he was on the podcast of been interviewed by his former, oh, what is his right hand man at one point in time during the campaign. I can see him. I just can't remember his name. And I listened to that. Not for the
Oh, it wasn't like Rahm Emanuel or somebody?
no, it was. I'm drawing a huge blank.
Okay.
Um, but I listened to that to just exactly what you said. I wasn't listening to the words. I was listening to the cadence, listening to how, and just
Yeah.
trying to get it down. And I almost got there. And then, so I've got his book, his audio book.
Okay.
And I've got a long ride coming up to Southwest Florida.
Oh, there you
Um,
go.
and the book is about 12 hours. So that's my idea of working on maybe his voice over this 12-hour long car ride.
Yeah, you need to just play, 2 or 3 minutes and then pause it and then work on it and then
Yep.
play some more.
And then work on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, but we could go on for hours about this stuff, and we will. And I'm looking forward to, because you're part of C-suite thought leaders. I'm part of C-suite thought leaders and thought council. And when Jeffrey has a one of his regional, not one of his all day council meetings, he used to have them live and in person.
Sure.
I can't wait till it has that again, because you and I will have to give them a little bit of entertainment and
Oh, that would be fun.
do improv for that group. It'd be
That would
fun.
be great. But yeah, I would look forward to that. And I'm looking forward to anything that we can do where we're in person.
Yes.
So
Live in person and not on Zoom,
yeah,
Microsoft Teams, or any other kind of virtual platform.
it's great. Yep, absolutely. No, that would be hilarious.
So I appreciate your time. Thank you so very much. It's been well. I like to laugh on my podcast with my guests, but I will admit this you had me laughing
Well,
really
thanks.
well there.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation. Because I know you speak generally on a similar. You use improvisation and techniques and what you write about and what you talk about and things. And it's just a great. There's so many different ways to look at that. And I really applaud the work you do with integrating improv into our personal lives and the business world, and how we interact.
I greatly appreciate that. And as when I mentioned about having you on my podcast, I go, I know we both speak in the same space. That's okay.
Yeah.
The more that we can raise the awareness that this is a tool, a leadership tool, and not it's also a comedic tool, but it has a lot of leadership characteristics, values, and it works. The more we can raise the awareness, the more business we both will get, and other improvisers who view it from our same vantage point will hopefully increase their businesses as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is truly something that resonates with people, and it keeps it from being another boring workshop or another boring presentation. People want to look forward to being entertained, or whatever the words are they use now, edutainment, or they want to be informed and have takeaways, but they want it to be fun.
So, Bob, how can people find you?
You can find me. My website is bobdusin.com. That's BOBDUSIN.com. and just search Bob Dusin on LinkedIn, and I'm there too. So yeah, and there's contact information if for any reason anybody would want to contact me or just have a conversation with Don Knotts or Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd be glad to do that. So yeah, you can find me in those locations. And again, Peter, thanks so much for having me join you today. It's been a blast. I love talking with you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for joining. This was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to when our paths cross again in person.
Absolutely.
That will be a scream.
Excellent. Look forward to it, Peter. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, bud.